Hello, Riley. We're gonna take a look at your aesthetics and control posting here, and also the sun as key. We'll go ahead and share and get to looking at what you put up here. So we've got aesthetics and control put up here. We've got here to hold, and looks like we got everything up there, the various shutter speeds. We've got exposures. Let's see, did we identify the other one? Not sure if we put the label on the other one or not. Half second. Looks like we did that one. We did exposure and you know better. So we've got you know better, exposures. We've got, looks like that is your aperture. How deep? There it is. Just a little bit of smaller labels on there. That way I was having a little trouble seeing them. Okay, so to hold, that's really all about the shutter speed, of course. And we had you doing the 3 basically so that you could explore the range of options. It's not just about the numbers, it's really more about the visual consequence of choosing those numbers. The numbers, of course, are all about how long the camera is left open to expose that sensor in there. The length of that time is how much time the light has to act on that sensor. The less time it has to act on that sensor, the more open the lens has to be. So as you adjusted that shutter speed, the aperture or the size of the hole had to be adjusted by the camera. So you were controlling shutter, camera was controlling the aperture. Now, of course, that also dictates whether things might appear to be moving or not. And at 1,000th of a second, things happen, 1,000 times in a second. And so your movement or the movement of the objects are pretty much going to be captured as they are, very still in a moment, at 1,000th of a second, or at least it should. Unless there's some kind of real, like, incredible movement going on. Or you're just simply out of focus. You didn't focus the camera. So anything that's out of focus in terms of 1,000th of a second, bear in mind it's going to be either you are out of focus, meaning the camera isn't focused, or the depth of field is very shallow because you're at 1,000th of a second. The camera had to open up quite a bit. And so that shallow depth of field gives you very little to work with in terms of things that are in focus. So therefore, some things can appear to be out of focus. As a result of that, this is why I was encouraging everyone to have their cameras on tripods when they're doing the project, so that they would not necessarily have to, or at least this part of the project, so that they wouldn't have to deal with at least one component. Now, when we're working with the longer shutter speeds with like half a second, now we're trying to exaggerate movement. Yeah, grab it off the tripod and maybe even move the camera deliberately because we can't stop the movement, that kind of stuff. So when you're looking at these and you're thinking, man, how did I not be able to get things sharp at 1,000th of a second? It's not because of the movement, it's because of the focus and the depth of field being so shallow. That said, we also have, it looks like you were having a little bit of trouble with the exposure, not bright enough light. Some of these are a little dark. Although it does look like you were kind of experimenting quite well here with some dropped items, and you were capturing movement and all of that kind of thing. I do like the sort of darker lighting. I don't think that's a problem. It got a little bit out of hand there. Here, the background here, this table, that can easily be corrected in Photoshop. Obviously, we can crop and that kind of thing, but we don't want to build that into our work, our kind of workflow. And so bear in mind those kinds of things. It's a challenge, really, because when you're working with shutter speeds and you're working with kind of factors with photography that you can't actually see, you're trying to capture movement, or you're trying to capture a certain depth of field or something like that, that your eyes can't really see until the camera captures it. You're having to anticipate and sort of um, kind of foresee what you're going to be seeing or capturing. And so you have to just anticipate what you're trying to find there, and it's not always going to work. So you have to shoot a lot of images and then subtly, kind of watch what you're doing. With the digital photography, it's much easier with digital because you're getting that instant feedback. As you make images, you can immediately see, oh, I need to adjust the camera because I'm getting some background information that I don't want, and that kind of thing. And so you do have to plan forward with some of these, and you do have to pay attention to what you're doing, even though it's a very spontaneous exercise where you're like dropping things and trying to capture things in the moment. You have to pre-visualize, and that's the word I was trying to think of earlier. Pre-visualize your images a bit so that you can anticipate things as they come up. So, things like where people are in the background and that kind of thing. Does that contribute to the image itself? Is that something we're looking to keep in the images, or is that an image that we just would want to really kind of not include in these kinds of things? Stuff like this, where we have the background. This could work if you incorporated everything. If this was done very deliberately and very carefully, where you were incorporating this sort of business in the foreground with the table and the objects and stuff happening in the background, there's a way to make that work. I don't know that you're deliberately trying to make that work, and so it doesn't appear that you're trying to make it work. But compositionally, if you thought about it and you kind of carefully placed things with the way you move the camera around and such, you could get something like this to work, if that's what you're trying to do. This is getting better because it feels a little bit more carefully looked at. You have a little bit of noise in the ceiling here, but again, those are just exposures. This stuff isn't easy. The photography can be all about like details and stuff, and you're incorporating a light source here, which is not easy to do, but I think you've done a fairly decent job in capturing it and incorporating it into the shot. I mean, I think that's a good job. This one, again, it gets kind of a little bit out of hand. That exit sign is really in the way of your imagery. This could work. You could get this kind of stuff working. The kind of geometry in the background with the curtain. You just have to be very careful and conscious about that. If we incorporated maybe more shadows up there onto the curtain, it would have looked more. It would look more deliberate in what you're doing. It will look more intentional. In the image, rather than, oh, I got that in my image and it really doesn't sort of participate. We always have these, we call them like misfires, where we're just kind of like working and then maybe something just happened. They could be gems. Sometimes we find images that really, really work sometimes. Not sure if this one would be one of them, but pay attention to these things. Sometimes they don't always immediately go to the trash. These 2-second images, I think you've started to find some things, and the background noise becomes a little bit less of a factor because it's moving. Even the people in the background become a little bit less problematic because things are moving. I think this one really is kind of a exciting and beautiful image. Here, this one is probably one of the better of the series that you're working on here. All right, well, now we're getting into the I think what you're qualifying as the how deep, I'm assuming. Yeah, this should be your how deep imagery. It looks like that's what we're attempting to do. Let me just make sure we'll back out here. Scroll through to that image. Yeah, go into the how deep. Now this one is really just a not just, but it's really an experiment. Just setting it up and to introduce you to the visuals of the depth of field. How apertures, how you can visualize a number like 5.6. It doesn't mean anything to you. F5.6. It's just a number until you see what it produces in the camera. 5.6 is an aperture. It's the size of the hole in relationship to the camera and the lens. And so that is, one thing. It's the size of the hole that is going to determine how much light is allowed through the lens. Now, the visual that's a consequence of that is going to be the depth of field. The depth of field is how quickly or how gradually the focus falls off after the critical plane. So when you focus the camera, you're focusing what's called a critical plane. You focus the camera and it's sharp. So after that sharp point, let's say the tip of my fingers is a sharp point, then it falls off like a pyramid like this. And so it falls off in the foreground and the background. And then the sharper it falls off, the shallower the depth of field, because it's falling off very quickly toward the camera over here. It's falling off very quickly. If it's deep depth of field, it's falling off very slowly. So basically, that's what we wanted to see within these images. I'm not seeing it very much in the images, and I'm not certain. Let's see if you've documented again what we have here. We didn't document what the f-stops or the apertures are here. So we should be seeing the objects here, like this pine cone, becoming more and more in focus as we go. And I'm not seeing that happen. So I'm not exactly sure if we accomplished this portion right. Let's take a look at your next one and see if we did the same. 1, 2, 3. Nope. I know you had a very limited amount of shutter speeds here, so that might be contributing to it. 1, 2, 3. Got a little bit of movement. Now, if you did go through this and it was done perfectly correctly, and we could talk about it if you would like, and if it was done exactly the way that it was set up, this could tell you a lot about your camera, that you have very limited range in terms of the in terms of depth of field control, because your apertures are so limited. You only have, like 3 apertures to work with, or 3 f-stops to go through in order to have that kind of depth of field control, which may not be to your satisfaction. It may tell you about the kind of equipment or the kind of tool that you may want to be looking at in the future. It looks like you set the experiment up correctly, and it. So I'm going to guess that you operated the camera correctly. I'm just presuming then that the camera must not be giving you very many options in terms of modulating that f-stop. So the equivalent exposures here, what we're attempting to have you do at this point is to be altering both the shutter speed and the apertures at the same time. And so, and adjusting them to correct the exposures from one to the other. In other words, you start off with one setting that we gave you, and then I asked you to kind of move the shutter speed in one direction and the apertures in the other direction, so that you understood the relationships, so that you practiced balancing the relationships, so that you would get a feel for how to manually control both of these things to your satisfaction, visual satisfaction. So you would be able to know what the apertures are going to produce visually, know what the shutter speeds are going to produce visually, and then be able to fine tune both of those to get exactly what you want in your photography. These are the ways in which you basically, the equivalent, I would say, maybe to mixing colors in painting, or perhaps changing the brushes or something like that, because this is a mixture of the way in which you're capturing or rendering the object. So maybe it's more like, a different weight of pencil or something like that. So these are specific controls, and they're not just numbers. They're not just dials on your camera. They're actions that you take to produce certain effects within your imagery. And so it looks like all the aperture, all the exposures are correct, meaning identical. You didn't log the solution, so I can't see exactly what the solutions were, but they look like they vary just slightly, which is normal if they vary slightly, because the nature of the light at one aperture or another is going to be slightly different. But overall, they look like they're pretty much the same. This one up at the top is a little bit darker. This one toward the bottom is a little bit lighter, but that's not uncommon for that kind of thing. The You Know Better, I just wanted you to kind of sandbox and play, basically, to work with all the different controls, all the different kind of things we're dealing with. Here you went from this completely backlit to the light. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to portray here for us in these 3, 4, 5, 6, or whether you're trying to portray a series of stuff here in showing basically the exact same image, just shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different ways. I think in the abstract and conceptual that can work, but I'm not exactly sure that this is the moment to be working through those kinds of things. I think you would have been better off or better served in the project to have explored more variety. I don't recall whether in your 5 characteristics, whether you had repetition in your images, meaning like images that looked very, very close to one another. And if you did, I would have suggested that you steer away from that kind of stuff, where you want to have lots of variety in your imagery. And this would be the same thing. So we want to avoid just having the same image over and over and over again with, basically this one is blurry, this one is like a little bit corrected. And so it's just not, these aren't various enough to qualify as different imagery. I appreciate that you got them all up there. Maybe it was you had a bad time or something and you couldn't quite get all the images up there for the last project. You're free to resubmit, of course. That's how all of that works. The single image, I think, is kind of cool. I mean, the image itself, as you're exploring it, is quite interesting. The lighting situation, and any one of these, as you're working with them, could be possibility, except maybe this one. This one just seems like an intermediary, like maybe you should not it's kind of like, oops, made a subtle error there. But this one seems to be like a kind of an interesting lighting solution, color balance, the way that the overall lighting looks, and so on. All right, well, let's move to your sunasKey. Take a look at what we have. This one's kind of the intermediary project where I wanted you guys to get out and use the sun as a key light, just to get used to using the sun as part of it, because of course we're doing the follow the sun afterward. Again, we're doing 2 of the same image, which that's not what we're wanting you to do. So we'll want to get away from that and include more than 2 of the exact same picture. You may not have realized that. Maybe in your critique you discovered that. Yeah, I mean, when you're working with a deep shade, I think you managed to get some images. You managed to get some light thrown in there, which is a good thing. Probably using either the shiny reflector or the mirror to get that. The open shade is probably the most useful of light, especially when you're doing things like texture and trying to capture shape and color. It's not great when you're wanting to get like a real drastic, dark, dynamic looking feel to the work, but open shade is excellent for things like portraiture and stuff. And you can see here you're capturing texture and color fairly well. The same thing here. I always wonder when we have objects like this. I would ask you to wonder, what is it that you're making an image of, right? What are you making an image about? When we include this sort of stuff. When we frame our camera around a thing, we point it at something, we kind of move it a little bit here, we dial the focus, we do all that stuff, and we click the button. And then even afterwards, we're looking at images and we say, that's the one I'm gonna choose to show everybody. Why? What for? You know, what is it that we're looking at? What is it that we are trying to tell everybody? What is it that we are interested in sharing? Ask yourself those things when you're making your imagery, and I will tell you to a certainty that that you'll discover something about what you have to communicate, because everybody does. Everybody has something to say. You just have to ask yourself, what is it that you have to say? And all your photography, none of it should be just arbitrary or anything. I'm not suggesting that any of your imagery is. I'm just challenging you to do that, to make sure that you are looking at your photographs and looking at all the stuff you make with that kind of intention of, what is it that I'm trying to communicate here, and really kind of demand that out of your work, because if you don't do that, if you're not doing it, then the viewer's not going to pick up on it either. I like the basic like switch over here. That's kind of fun, but again, I won't beat a dead horse. We know these are two of the same image. This is an interesting sort of sort of portrait, I guess, of the bottle. It's not really doing much in terms of a photograph and composition. I think we could probably explore a little bit better in terms of arranging objects and, more photographic composition, being a little more sensitive. This one would need a little bit of a reflector of some sort, any kind of white object, light colored object, to bounce some light back into this area right in here would have kind of brought it up a little bit. You may have had something there and it's just not giving it enough light there. You're getting something called keystoning also. That's where the perspective, you're kind of looking up at the angle and it's a little bit too dramatic. And so what happens is, because you're looking up, it kind of keystones, kind of the lines that should be parallel kind of start to turn in like that. And that's because it's getting farther away from you. It appears to be getting smaller. Even at that short distance, like 8 inches, it still appears to look like it's getting a little bit smaller there. So you want to kind of avoid that when you're doing things that are more of a geometry. See how here it doesn't have that effect because you're more straight on to it. So these are the things that you want to kind of look for. So, I think you're kind of working through some things. Obviously, you're experimenting. Not all of the images are, are home runs. Some of them I think are have a lot of potential. Some of the things I think they're working very well. Let's pay attention to those repetition on the images. We don't want to have multiple images like that over and over again. And, just keep shooting. That's all I can really recommend, is to just keep making photographs and ask yourself again, what is your attention when you're making imagery or art altogether? What is it that you're wanting to share with us? And that will immediately take you to another level in terms of your in your art and your creativity. All right. Well, we'll see you in the studio, and I look forward to more images. All right. Bye now.